Hello and welcome once again to the Doctor Who Show. I'm Dave.
And I'm Rob.
And this is our episode for February, where we are going to be looking at a season in depth, which one we'll reveal in a moment, because it was based, remember, on your feedback, listeners.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Dave, this is a very short month.
It is a very short month. I'm kind of amazed at just how quickly this recording has come around again, but we've still got a heap to talk about.
Oh, we sure do. There's a ton of stuff, a ton of news, there's some mini topics, there is our season review, and we've got a lot of feedback as well to get through at the end of the episode.
We have. So how are you, Rob?
Oh, look, Dave, I'm really good. I was out on the beers last night with Jono Park from the Zeus Plug podcast. Hello, Jono.
So hang on. He's from New Zealand?
He is from New Zealand. He is a Kiwi.
So were you there across the ditch, or was he over here?
He was over here. He was over here in Sydney for a couple of days, and he reached out and said, "Look, I'm in town. Let's get together and talk because, you know, just between you and me, Dave, Jono and I are talking about doing a non-Doctor Who podcast in the future."
Interesting.
So we were sort of hashing that out, drinking beers. We're drinking Kiwi beers, actually. That was quite funny. It was a good night.
Oh, well, I hope, Jono, if you're listening, I hope you enjoyed your time in the Emerald City.
Good-o.
Before we get into announcing our topic, I just wanted to say, Rob, look, we're always very pleased when we get any sort of feedback about our podcasts and, you know, people enjoying our discussions is always good to hear. But the just outpouring of genuine warmth and interest and love from our discussion about Terrance Dicks was really quite wonderful. It made what was already a very enjoyable podcast episode for us even more special. And so thank you to everyone who listened. Thank you to everyone who tweeted us and wrote to us and emailed us or just got in touch to say, guys, really love that conversation. Because let's face it, I guess everybody loves Terrance Dicks, and it was just really good to celebrate that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. From Steve over at E02 saying, how do we get this guy knighted, you know, on down? It was just love. And I love to see that in fandom, because Doctor Who fandom, like Star Wars fandom and Star Trek fandom and every sort of genre fandom at the moment, is so split and divided, and people just want to punch on all the time. And sometimes it's even, you know, justified in some ways, but, you know, let's not go down that path. Just once in a while, it's nice that everyone loves something. It's nice. It's beautiful.
That is true. I suspect that it's not going to be quite as undivisive and wholesome tonight.
Well, we'll see. You might be surprised.
We'll see. So we asked listeners at the end of our last podcast for you to nominate which season of Doctor Who you would like Rob and I to dive down deep into and have a look at and compare it to its legacy and all that sort of thing. And we got some wonderful ideas, really spread out ideas, Rob.
Oh, for sure. We got tons of tweets and emails, some of which we'll read at the end of the show. And it was really mixed. You know, people going after old black and white eras, some people wanting some new Who stuff. But I would say, Dave, most people, not all, wanted stuff from the JNT 80s kind of era.
Yeah, that was very much the trend. So we had a look at that. There was no real standout. There were a few that were more popular than others. But yeah, a lot around the JNT era. Now, because I did trial watch less than a year ago and watched all of Trial over 14 weeks, I just personally asked if we could put that one aside for now. Not because, you know, oh my God, I couldn't stand watching Trial again, but just because I feel like I've said what I have to say about Trial recently, and I don't want to just be repeating myself. I want to have new ideas, so we put that aside.
And also, I was going to say, also, there was some McCoy love, but I find McCoy gets reevaluated an awful lot on podcasts, so I sort of stuck my hand up and said, he kind of gets done a lot on podcasts. I'm not too sure about McCoy stuff, even though I quite enjoy his era.
Yeah, that's right, and we did have a look at the Davison era not that long ago, but in the middle of that all, there were a lot of votes for season 22, and we thought, you know what? Lots of people want the JNT era. Lots of people are voting for Collins seasons, whether it's 22 or 23. I hadn't watched it in a long time, and I thought, I would really like to go back and watch this and have another look at it. So I was keen, and Rob, you were keen as well.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer. It wasn't Davo or McCoy. It was a JNT season, and it was Colin. It ticked all the boxes, you know, and it's not what you all voted for, I know, but it's a significant number voted for Colin, at least.
That's right. So we will be looking at season 22 as the main part of this podcast. I'm looking forward to it. I have mixed views, I have to say, and different views here and there. But we've also got some good ideas for future season deep dives. The idea does seem to have a bit of popularity out there. But before then, Rob, we have some news, and you're going to kick us off.
Yeah, we certainly do. So let's blast through this, Dave. There's a new book coming out from the people over at ATB Publishing. You might know these guys. They did the Red, White and Blue, or was it Red, White and Who book? I should know because I bought it. It was about Doctor Who fandom in the US. It was the size of a brick too.
I remember you reviewing that. Yes, I remember that.
They're putting out this book by Anthony Wilson and Robert Smith, who are both well known in fandom, and it's called Bookworm, and worm is spelled W-Y-R-M, so you might already have a feel for what this might be talking about. Yes, it's talking about the NAs, the New Adventures, from 91 to 97. It's basically a guide to them, an unauthorised and unconventional guide, they're calling it.
That's really piqued my interest, Rob.
I thought it might. And because it's not the size of a brick, it's a lot cheaper than the Red, White and Who book as well.
Oh, good. No, I'll definitely be getting that. I'll be very interested to see what it is and how they cover it. It's really interesting because the one disadvantage of a really good book series is that you can't just go back, put on a story, and 90 minutes later you've rewatched it. Like, not that the New Adventures take days and days to read, but there is a commitment to go back and say, gee, I'd like to read Legacy again, or I'd like to read Lungbarrow again, and, well, that's a few evenings reading, as opposed to I can just put it on while I'm doing the ironing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really looking forward to this. I've already pre-ordered one. I tweeted it out. It already got some retweets from the folks over there in the States who are putting it together. So I was happy to see that. You know, a bit of love around the world. Some more love, Dave, in fandom. Isn't it a good thing?
It is a good thing.
And I also slipped in to mention, and by the way, did you see our NAs and MAs show last year? So that's also getting a bit of love, some fresh love as well. People rediscovering that episode we did.
Oh, good. I really enjoyed that one. Some news of a different variety, one that I think came completely out of left field. The BBC has announced it is releasing an animated virtual reality Doctor Who film in 2019.
Yes, now I've seen a bit of this, well, not the film itself, but like screenshots from it and stuff. It's the Whittaker Doctor, you know, and it's virtual reality. They're really pushing the boat out here, you know, having a real crack, trying to do new things, you know, with the property.
Yeah, so it's going to be called Doctor Who The Runaway. It'll be a 12-minute piece, and I am genuinely curious as to what this is, and I get the feeling this is very much about the BBC pushing a little bit further into new media, new frontiers, and what better way to do that than with Doctor Who?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this new TARDIS interior isn't a fave of yours, and it's not a fave of mine, but I'm still curious, you know, to be able to sort of walk around in that space with, you know, a sort of an animated doctor talking to you and look from side to side, maybe turn a circle and see it 360 degrees. I think that's still quite an interesting experience to have. I'll certainly, you know, download it or however you get it.
Yeah, look, I have absolutely no idea how you acquire these things or play these things, and I'll be curious to see what happens. My interest is less about this per se, as in I'm not particularly desperately interested in seeing this 12 minutes, but it is a case of, okay, if this 12 minutes works, what do they then do with the technology in perhaps a more, in inverted commas, serious manner or a bigger scale?
Oh, wouldn't a virtual reality episode of the show be good?
Yeah, so it's, you know, you look back at that, you know, the first thing that the BBC ever did on, you know, as a streaming show, for example, and now that streaming is a major way of consuming media. But there was a first, there was a tiny little first, and this is that, and I'm very curious to see where this goes.
Yeah, and there is a precedent using Doctor Who for these things in the past as well. I guess they think Doctor Who fans might be a bit more techie / nerdy / geeky / into this sort of, you know, using new technology kind of stuff, whether it's back in the 90s when they were messing around with multimedia, really basic multimedia, or whether it's something like this.
Oh, I can absolutely say from personal experience and what I've seen, Doctor Who fans are very much early adapters. They were many of the first people I knew to have CD players, the first people to have DVD players. They got on the internet not just with basic programs, but, you know, many of them had more expensive internet programs and packages well before they were common. So yeah, I think Doctor Who fans are very much early adapters, and it makes a lot of sense to aim this at them. And the final thing I just want to add is, for those people who were on Twitter saying they were disappointed that this was the big news to be released at midnight, guys, nothing big is released at midnight. So the next time the BBC comes out and says there'll be news at midnight, all that means is that a media embargo is lifting on a story. It might be an interesting story. It might be a nice story. It will not be a new Doctor. It will not be a new season. It will not be missing episodes. That will be done during the daytime with a press conference. Just let's everybody just calm down about these midnight things and not being disappointed, because they're not going to be what you think they are. It's just not. Just
exactly.
move on.
Although it's easier for us here because midnight in the UK is a far more respectable time here, so we can be up in inverted commas for these announcements anyway.
Yeah, we can just have Twitter on, over lunch and see what's going on. We don't have to be specially getting up to watch them and then be like, I stayed up for this. Come on, guys.
Exactly. Moving along, Big Chief make the big 12-inch figures, Dave. Have you seen those? They're like, got little outfits and so on, all the different doctors, some of the companions.
I'm vaguely aware. I've seen pictures tweeted. I've never seen one in real life.
Oh, okay. They're lovely. I actually own some. They've done a Hartnell. They're looking at doing a Pertwee. They've done a Tom Baker. They've got an Eccleston. A couple of Matt Smiths. A Tennant. They've done some really good work, and I think it's a sign of the times in two ways. First of all, I think the market for this sort of stuff might be waning a bit because the company's saying, let's sort of get people's interest in our next figure, and then if we can get 500 people interested, we'll do it. I think that's just a sign of the times in that sort of figure industry. But at the same time, their next figure is a Jodie Whittaker. And I got to tell you, Dave, this is a 40-day campaign to try and get 500 people interested. Not even putting their money down, but just interested. And the campaign is still in the low 300s. They haven't even cracked 500 people yet who will buy a Jodie Whittaker figure, when in the past they have sold thousands of Tennants, Smiths, even Hartnell. There was a run of at least 500 of Hartnell. People bought Hartnell very happily, but Whittaker, ooh, at least in this market, people don't want to buy a Whittaker 12-inch figure.
Is that because of the lack of nostalgia?
Look, it could be. I mean, the classic Doctors are quite popular in this range, but people were buying Tennant not long after he'd left the role. They were buying Capaldi when he was still in the role, and they happily sold, I think, about 1,000 Capaldis.
Okay, that is interesting. I mean, nostalgia is my first guess, because I do think that these sort of things do naturally play to that nostalgia, that fond memory. Even something, that's 3 or 4 years ago could be nostalgic. And that's why I felt they went for. But no, I don't have any insider explanation beyond that guess.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm wondering whether they'll even hit the 500, whether they'll make the figure, or whether they'll do it in a different way. I mean, these 500, they're saying, look, if you're the first 500, you'll get a signed plaque from Jodie Whittaker. You'll get free international postage. You'll get all these little extras. They're really trying to beef it up and make it very, very attractive to collectors, and they still can't crack. Well, they've barely cracked 300, and they were wanting to crack 500. I think it's just notable to just mention.
No, yeah, I'm genuinely intrigued by that, and I'll be looking for an update from you, Rob, in a month's time as to whether they got to the 500.
Yeah, exactly.
A quick piece from me. There was an article in the Radio Times, which is titled, with a bit of a nod to clickbait perhaps, Mandeep Gill reacts to Doctor Who fans shipping Yaz and Jodie Whittaker's Doctor.
Well, you got to give Yaz something to do.
Look, this I think was all a bit of a beat up based on that typical mother joke that we saw in one of those episodes. I think it was the Arachnids episode, Rob, where the mother made the joke, like, always wanting her daughter to be hitched to somebody, like, oh, here's your friend, is he your boyfriend? Oh, here's your friend, is he your boyfriend? Oh, well, she's your friend, is she your girlfriend? Sort of that joke about, I actually don't care whether you're dating a guy or a girl. I just wish you were dating someone. Anyone is better than nothing.
Yes.
Like, I thought that's with a joke, but people saw it as being not a joke and actually being a genuine, no, Yaz has come out to her mother as bisexual, so she's naturally asking, is it a boy, is it a girl? I get the feeling, and if it was, is the Doctor involved, etc., etc. So Mandeep Gill says, It must have just been natural chemistry between Jodie and I. And the article says, however, despite being unplanned, Gill suggested that she wouldn't be adverse to some sort of relationship developing. Now, during this article, Mandeep Gill is sort of a bit shocked that we never intended this, so we don't know why people are shipping it, which suggests to me she doesn't know what shipping really is.
Yes.
And, there are some weird and wonderful and lovely characters shipped out there in the internet. And look, deep down, I'm sure we've all got our favourite little private ships that we entertain, but... Look,
yeah, let's not get into those.
No, we definitely won't. But, yeah, Mandeep's just saying, hey, we had no idea, we didn't intend this, but, hey, that's cool, and, hey, internet, who knows what could happen? Wink, wink, tune in next year and find out.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be anything, Dave, do you?
No.
No. All right, let's move on. Really brief now. 10th Planet Events is closing in the UK. Well, sort of. They say the people behind it are retiring, but they might be doing something in the future. It's all a bit vague, but they are having a sort of a closing down sale with 10% off. This is where you go to get Doctor Who autographs. I've found it particularly useful over the years to get autographs of people I would never see at conventions. For example, I got a Nicholas Courtney autograph through them before he passed away. They are a very reputable mob. You can buy from them with confidence. I fully recommend them, and they're sort of going out of business, so get in while you can. I've actually put in a little order, picked up a Philip Hinchcliffe and a few sound people, and some more obscure autographs that I just would never get out here in a million years, and they're reasonably cheap too.
Yeah, they do have that very good reputation, as you say, Rob, for being extremely reliable and reputable. So, look, it's not something I've ever purchased from, but they've always been a part of fandom, and I've always been very aware of them. So, look, everything moves on, and if people who are doing the running are moving on in their life, that's perfectly fair and reasonable and probably sensible at some point. But it is a shame.
Yeah, it is. They've run a whole bunch of little events and little signings that people can go along to. In the past 6 months, they did a Peter Purvis signing over in the UK, and while that was going on, I got them to get me a Peter Purvis signature. So it's signed to Rob from Peter Purvis, my favourite male companion of the 60s. It's a shame I just didn't get to meet him in the process, but, can't have everything.
No, but fair enough.
Shall we move on?
Yes, so we've got a mini topic each we just wanted to discuss, Rob, before we get to our main topic.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention to you, I've been listening to some Big Finish.
That's really interesting, because you're sometimes quite, not standoffish, but maybe a bit, what's the word, Dave, for
Cautious?
you and Big Finish? Cautious, that's a great word.
I was curious. So, as you know, I've always been a fan of the Virgin New Adventures and Missing Adventures, and I have in the past listened to a couple of their adaptations of the 3 Gareth Roberts, Tom Baker stories. And I thought it was time to actually listen to a few more, so I bought a few more. I bought some of the McCoy ones. So I've listened to The Higher Science, I've listened to Nightshade, and I've listened to Love and War, which were 3 of my favourite books. And I more or less enjoyed them. I thought that a couple were better than the other one. I'll say it. The Nightshade disappointed me. I think that there was too much in that book that they just couldn't make into a 90-minute adventure, and what they had to take out really took out the meat of the story, and that to me was a shame. It didn't quite work. However, I thought they adapted The Higher Science and Love and War really well. There were small plots and C plots and D plots in that you could take out and still leave the bulk of the story to work. Mm-hmm. And McCoy's good in them, Sophie Aldred's good in them, Lisa Barryman I think it is, who plays Bernice Summerfield in that, was very good. So I enjoyed that, and I've ordered a couple more to go and listen to. In fact, I've basically ordered all the Virgin novel adaptations, apart from the one with Nick Briggs's face on the cover, because that just looked like too much of an ego trip CD for me. So I've paused on that one, and I'll be honest here, Rob. It's really summed up for me the pros and the cons of the Big Finish range as I've always experienced them. The pro is that it gives you this way to do different stories in a different format that can explore stuff that you couldn't afford to do, like adapting novels, stories with old doctors and different companions. That is a good thing. Like I've never said that's a bad thing. It is a very good thing that Big Finish is out there and can do them. But the negative side of it was, having listened to a few of these and ordered a couple of more, I thought, maybe it's time I give Big Finish a bit of a broader look. I'll go on the website, maybe I'll find a couple of other stories to buy and have a listen to, and every category I'd go to would be like, there are 82 topic. There are 82 titles in this range, or there are 120 titles in this range. And I just thought, sod that for a game of soldiers. I'm just not going to do it. Like, I'm very curious to listen to a couple of the later Tom Baker ones. I listened to one or two of the Tom and Mary Tam ones when they first came out. Wasn't that impressed, to be honest, but I'm told they've got a lot better. The ones with him and Louise Jamison, for example, are, I'm told, very good. But how do you know which of the 20-something stories is the one to dip into? And I just sort of walk away going, this is too much. I'm overwhelmed. Goodbye.
Yeah. I feel that way with the range too. But one thing I will say, because I joke about Big Finish at the best of times, when they take obscure characters and do box sets on them and stuff. That's just ripe for parody. But one thing I will say is, look, when we look back in another 10 years' time and, Tom Baker's probably left this mortal coil, maybe some of the other doctors have, people like Sylvester and Colin are, in their 70s now, aren't they?
Oh, yes.
There will be a time where all the classic doctors have departed, even my dear Davo, and there'll be all this stuff to dip into and remember them by. And I kind of think I've always got Big Finish sort of at arm's length, but knowing it's there is kind of comforting in a way. Does that sound weird?
No, not at all. I totally get where you're coming from. And in fact, another example of that is another one that I bought and listened to was Frostfire, which is a companion chronicle, which is basically a story being read by Maureen O'Brien as Vicky. And I bought that one because listening to an episode of Flight Through Entirety, they talked about the Mythmakers and said, oh, this is a sequel to the Mythmakers told by Vicky. I thought, my curiosity is piqued there. I will go and listen to this. And look, it was a lovely little story. It was lovely to hear Maureen O'Brien again playing that character. Am I going to go back and listen to it again? Probably not. Have I really got my real value from the price that it cost me to get it out here? Maybe not. But it's lovely to know it's there. It's lovely to have it. And they will be there forever. Yeah. So it could be in 10 years' time that I need to drive to Kubapedia or something and go, right, I'll get myself 5 Big Finishes from 20 years ago and I can listen to the, sadly departed Tom Baker.
Yeah, exactly right. And it sounds like you're buying the discs too. Is that right?
Yes, it is, because I've never quite worked out how to make Big Finish work on an iPhone.
Oh, okay. I have, and I've got to say I'm really enjoying the app. I mean, I buy mostly discs as well, but the beautiful thing is when you buy the disc, you get the download for free on your account.
You do, yes.
So I've found that some of my discs here I've not even opened. They're just sitting on the shelf still in cellophane because I've downloaded it on the app and then listened to it on the app, and that's actually quite a good app. I might have to show you next time you're up in Sydney.
Yeah, look, it is on my to-do list to play around and work out how to do that app so I don't have to buy CDs. But again, I can be grumpy old man here and say, well, why should I have to work out an app just to play your product?
Well, I'll give you one reason, and this happened when I bought my new car middle of last year. My new car, Dave, didn't come with a CD player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Mazda, in my particular model of car, had done away with the CD player. Earlier versions of the model had it, but the revision model, which mine was of this particular car, no, we're not having it. It's just an entertainment system with, a radio and Bluetooth and all of that, but there is no CD player. So you've got to, stream off your phone or stick in a USB stick or something. So having these things digitally is quite useful without having to rip them yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm a big user of the car Bluetooth, don't get me wrong.
Oh, podcasts all the time, yeah.
Yeah, just Big Finish has historically been a little bit funny with iPhones, and it's, I remember once when I was overseas having to download some workaround app, and it's just no, I'll just buy the CD. But yeah, look, I have listened to Big Finish, and I'm going to listen to a few more over the next couple of months.
Oh, very good. My short topic this week is I think I'm coming out of a Doctor Who rut. Dave, I think I have one of these every year after a new series. Not because the series is particularly bad or, whatever. I just think I get hooed out, and need a couple of months rest.
Yeah, no, totally understand that.
And one of the things that's got me through these past couple of months is I finally pulled up, for those in Australia, the SBS app on my television and have been watching The Orville, and I have been loving it.
Yes, okay, so I watched the first probably third of season 1 of The Orville, and I didn't dislike it. In fact, I mostly enjoyed it, but my feeling was it hadn't quite decided what it was yet, and it was quite awkward to watch, and so it kind of accidentally, non-deliberately fell off my viewing schedule, but you've obviously stuck with it.
Oh, absolutely. I've been binging it and, blasted through all the available episodes, and now I'm actually watching it week to week. And I've got to say, the episode that went out this week that I watched just tonight before we came on the air, it's called Identity Part 1. I won't give it away, but my God, at the end of it, I turned to my wife and said, "This is a comedy?" Because it's pretty heavy what happens in this episode. I mean, there's been heavy stuff in many episodes throughout. That's one point I'll make. It's not quite a comedy. Sure, people say funny stuff here and there, but often the topics and what happens in the episodes is very, very serious. And this one that went out, well, the one that I watched tonight at least, wow. It was, I'll say this, a lot of crew members got killed.
Wow.
Yeah, it wasn't like, happy fun time laughs at the cantina on the ship. It was people were getting killed, and it's ended on a real cliffhanger. And I'm like, holy hell, where's this going?
You're not the first person in the last month, Rob, to say something similar to me. A number of people who fell off the Orville in season 1 gave it another go in season 2, and they seem to be uniformly saying, this is a big step up. It's a lot more focused. The topics and the issues are really good. Get back on this show. Come join us back on this horse.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's great. And I know Seth MacFarlane isn't everyone's cup of tea. In fact, I tried introducing the show to some people at work. And they're like, oh, Seth MacFarlane's in that. I can't stand him. He's so smug. He's so this. He's so that. I'm like, really? He's my man crush. which kind of surprised them.
He's pretty smug, though.
Yeah, he is, but he's also very talented. Have you heard him sing jazz?
No, and I feel like I'm okay with that.
He's very good. You're sounding like the people at my work, Dave.
No, look, Seth MacFarlane's one of those people I have a genuinely very long list of praise for, and a not quite as long but substantive list of negatives about him. I think he's that sort of a character. My question for you: is it possible as a viewer to just come back and start with episode 1 of season 2, or would actually catching up properly and watching the rest of season 1 be necessary?
Oh, look, I don't think it's necessary. I think they're mostly like story of the week type things. Yep. And so you could just start with season 2, that's fine. But I think you'd miss some pretty good stories, actually, if you did that.
Okay. All right. It'll be back on my list.
Yeah, but I just love it, on face value, it was like, oh, this is a piss take of the Next Generation, from the music to the fact, behind the scenes, Next Generation people work on it, to the really flat lighting that they use.
Yes.
It's like watching Next Gen. But it's funny, it's sad, and some bits really surprise you. But anyway, I know this is a Doctor Who podcast, so I'll stop talking about the Orville.
Which is a good way of saying, Rob, let's get to our main topic, Doctor Who Season 22, A Deep Dive.
Yes, let's get into it, Dave.
So, 2 points I want to make right from the start. One personal and one professional is the wrong word, but analytical, if you like. The personal is, this is actually, and I didn't really realise this until I was thinking about it, this is the first season of Doctor Who I can actually remember going out properly. There are seasons in the Davo era, well, more stories in the Davo era, really, like Mordred Undead or The Awakening or Planet of Fire. I can remember images. I can remember moments as a kid, like the malice in the TARDIS or the malice coming out of the church wall and other things. I can remember that, but I couldn't remember actually watching the story. Whereas by season 22, I was just old enough to know that Doctor Who was a show I liked, to be growing as a fan at the age of sort of about 5 or 6, probably close to 6 by the time I got out here. And I remember watching these stories. I can actually remember watching Attack of the Cybermen. I remember watching Vengeance on Varos. And indeed, I can remember because my dad and I had the Radio Times 20th Anniversary magazine, and the program guide in that only went as far as the Twin Dilemma. So we slotted a piece of paper into it, and every week we were going through and adding to the episode guide in this magazine.
Nice.
So, yeah, I actually do have some quite fond memories of this.
Before you go on, Dave, I'll just say my piece on how I sort of came to it.
Yeah.
I watched this piecemeal. I was getting into fandom in late 86. This had already gone out, and I hadn't sort of watched it religiously. I have memories of seeing the Davo era. I have memories of seeing the Colin era, but this first season of Colin, I didn't watch properly. I saw it piecemeal through videos with my local fan group. So I was sort of watching stories all in one hit. I wasn't seeing them when they were sort of going out the first time on Australian television. It wasn't until Trial of a Time Lord aired in Australia that I was religiously watching week to week.
Interesting. Okay, two very different approaches. So, having made the personal comment, the analytical comment I wanted to make is just giving you kind of my view of where this season sits in terms of the show and the production team. Because obviously J&T has been the producer now since season 18, had more hits than misses, it's pretty fair to say, in the seasons he's done so far.
Oh, absolutely. You know, people, when they look back on his whole career now, they sort of see the ups and downs. But at this point, he hadn't had too many downs. He'd had quite a few successes.
Yeah, very, very much so. For me, Eric Saywood had been appointed the script editor towards the end of season 19. Season 20 is literally just him sort of getting his feet under the desk and going, right, how do you script edit Doctor Who? Where am I going to get my authors from? How do I pull this together? We're doing something from every... Okay, and just sort of getting a season out. Not a bad season, but it's very much just get this season out and I need to work out what I'm doing. With season 21, that's where Saywood is able to sit down and go, right, what is the story I want to tell in Doctor Who? What is this tone that I want to have in Doctor Who? What does my season of Doctor Who look like? And that's where you start to get stories like Warriors of the Deep, which, you know, for its production faults, is a very well-written, good story, in my opinion. You've got Frontios, well-written, exciting adventure. Resurrection of the Daleks, Planet of Fire, Caves of Bloody Androzani. You know, you get this season that's put together. Now, whether you like the tone or not, I don't think anyone can argue that season 21 doesn't have a very deliberate, structured tone that has been put together really well. And I think it is the peak of Eric Saywood, supported by J&T, who, you know, really knows what he's doing at this point and is putting it all together. You then get into season 22, new Doctor and everything. And the real feeling that I got watching this back for the podcast is this sense of a production team going, okay, everybody, we're going to give you what we know you love. Here you go. Why don't you used to like this? We're doing that trick you like. We're doing that thing you like. Why you should be loving this. You always used to. That's the real feeling I got here, that everything here logically should work. Some of it really does work. Some of it really doesn't. And I think it's, to get my Simpsons reference in for the episode, Rob.
Yes, please.
It's like the start of the Itchy, Scratchy and Poochie episode, where the Itchy and Scratchy production company's going, kids, you love this stuff. This is classic. This is everything that you love. And the kids going, well, yeah, we've seen it before.
Yeah.
No, it's not new anymore. But you love it. Like, that's kind of how this season feels to me. I think some of that is valid, some of it is not valid. And that's perhaps the thematic umbrella under which I'm going to be talking a bit about this season.
Yeah, look, all very fair comments, Dave. I'm going to jump in and say, you know, with the casting of Colin Baker, I'm always in two worlds on Colin Baker. You know, there are times where I really enjoy what he does, and there are other times I think your personality is too big, it's too panto, it's just not fitting on television, you know. There's just something about it, and I watch it and I think, oh, if Davo was doing that scene, it would be so different and it would probably work. And here it just feels like panto at times. But you know what? I do like several of the stories in this season.
Me too.
So, although I'm saying, you know, I'm not sure if Colin's right, he's a 50-50 proposition for me, and sometimes it's like panto, and, you know, there are still stories here that are really good. So I'll just say that up front as well, so before people think I'm just going to be bashing it as we go along.
Yeah, and there were Colin moments in this that I sort of saw for the first time in a long time and thought, hey, I get what he's doing there. That's kind of clever. That's kind of good. And there are other moments where you just sit there and go, ooh, you really are new at this, aren't you?
Oh, well, look, I kicked off this rewatch by actually watching Twin Dilemma as well, just to get me in the mood, as it were. And there were bits in that where I thought, I don't remember liking that part before, but actually Colin is being quite fun and likable, and he delivered that line in a really cheeky way, you know, and I started seeing a different sort of performance to what I've seen in the past and what I've assumed I've seen in the past, if that makes any sense. And I actually saw some new things from him, and I thought, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought.
And of course, we not that long ago, Rob, did our whole run through Jodie Whittaker's first season of The Doctor, and all the way through that we were saying it takes a year for a Doctor to really hit their strides and really know what their character's like. Okay, there are exceptions. Tom Baker does it from scene one, but Tom Baker's playing Tom Baker.
Yes.
He had a cheat there. Most Doctors aren't doing that, and it does take them time. And across this season, again, you really do feel Colin just trying different things, and there may be things that he was also going, ooh, I thought that'd be a good idea, but didn't quite work. And I think there must have been, because as you watch him go on in Trial of a Time Lord, a lot of those rough edges are smoothed out. So before we go any further, fan rep on this one, fair to say, I actually think has never been a particularly strong reputation.
That's very fair. I don't think fans have really held it up as a shining example of 82. The fact the show got cancelled, essentially, after this, and only brought back at the behest of, fans and and that god-awful single, I think that plays into it as well. People see this as the season that got Doctor Who axed, basically.
Yeah, and although Colin himself has had a bit of a renaissance with a number of fans, many of them say that's off the back of Big Finish rather than a new love for his era. So, again, it'll be interesting to see whether some of those fan views and fan rationales for that view do hold up.
Yeah, look, just to go back to Twin Dilemma, and I know that's not part of the stories we're going to be discussing, there's a scene in that where I think he's going to attack Asmael, and he runs across the room and jumps over a chair and says, "Villain!" And it is so cheesy and awful.
Yes.
And it's like, on Big Finish, of course, this never happens. So his Doctor comes across as, much better. But some of the stuff, some of the direction, some of the stuff he's given to do, it is woeful. It's not even good children's TV from the mid-'80s. It's not good at all.
And so that's an important jumping off point, I think, into the actual stories. Because the fan legend or the fan narrative is that you have Caves of Androzani, everybody thinks it's a wonderful story, big exit for the Doctor, for the Davison Doctor. You then watch Twin Dilemma and it was like, what just happened? That was terrible. Okay, look, we'll tune in for the first one of the next season to see, was that an aberration? They tune in for Attack of the Cybermen, they get more of the same, and the audience just switches off. That's kind of the fan narrative. If you look at the ratings, it doesn't really hold up. The ratings actually don't drop off a cliff at the end of Attack of the Cybermen Part 1. There's a decline and a shift and all the usual ratings ups and downs. But yeah, the fan reputation is that Attack of the Cybermen validated the concerns that people had out of Twin Dilemma. I'm going to say right from the bat, I don't think that's fair or correct or justified at all.
And I would completely agree with you on that. Absolutely.
I in fact, struggle to understand, having watched this back, and having watched it a few times over the last couple of years, why Attack of the Cybermen has that reputation as the one that just killed Colin Stone dead at the start of the season. I think that it is because fans are a little bit aware that the continuity stuff is the weakest aspect and it's their fault that's in there. Mm-hmm. And there's a little bit of misdirected guilt, perhaps. But back to my opening point, this is a new Doctor being introduced with a classic monster, the Cybermen. Mm-hmm. Nicola's doing well. You get adventures in space and time. You get stuff in a quarry. The Cryons are a really weird, different take on an alien. They look kind of cool. The tombs look cool. Okay, they don't look like Tomb of the Cybermen, but who cares? And the TARDIS changes shape. And look, I don't care. When I was 6, that was the most exciting thing to happen in my year, with the possible exception of Halley's Comet actually visiting. The TARDIS changed shape, Rob.
I know, and I remember at the time being just outraged at the thought that they'd do this. I saw it as sacrilege, but now I see it as quite a fun, quirky thing. You know, I don't mind that aspect at all. And the fact, yes, they're on Telos and so on. And if I have one criticism of it now as an older fan who has seen Tomb of the Cybermen, which, correct me if I'm wrong, did that even exist at the time this went out?
No,
it was still a lost story, wasn't it?
Yeah, lost for another 7 years, I think.
Yeah, okay, so like people hadn't seen that story. Now looking back as an older fan who's seen Tomb of the Cybermen, I kind of think, oh gosh, wouldn't it have been nice if they had made the set a bit more retro? Could they have not got that 60s Cyberman logo and put that somewhere? You know, could they have not done more with the way it looked? That would have been amazing. But, you know, putting that aside, all the early stuff and the creeping around the sewers and the return of Lytton and, you know, I think it's all quite good. And people do, you know, almost dumb it down to, oh, it's just very violent and Cybermen have their heads knocked off and they're shot through the mouthpiece and Lytton's hands are crushed and all that sort of stuff. And I've got to say, as a kid, I don't know about you, Dave, but as a kid, I grew up with sci-fi stories and, you know, nasty horror movies and stuff, and I was quite okay with all of this kind of thing. And even as I got a bit older, like 12, 13, 14, 15, I would think to myself, well, you know, if the Cybermen did catch you, you know, they would cybernize you or they would crush your hands. This is what would happen. You know, you wouldn't just sort of say some quips and run away and everything would be okay. That's more unrealistic than actually someone getting their hands crushed. So I never quite had a problem with this. I don't have a problem with a lot of quotation marks gun Doctor Who. You know, then again, we'll discuss Mind Warp at some stage in the future, and I'll have quite a few bad things to say about it. So it's not like a blanket sort of thing for me, but this season, I don't mind the violence so much. I don't mind the acid baths. I don't mind the Cybermen's heads being knocked off. It's all good to me. But that's kind of because that's the kind of kid I was and the kind of stuff I was watching.
I certainly have some thoughts on the violence in this story and others that I want to come back to as a bit of a bunch later on in our chat.
Okay.
I certainly agree with all the points you made about this story. I think it is a good adventure. I think the characters are very good characters. Even some of the minor ones are very entertaining and well-played characters. I think that's a good thing. I do see the fault in it. It does look a little bit cheaper than Doctor Who has in the past. Mm-hmm. That's nothing to crucify a story for, but it does show. I think that there are plot threads that do kind of go nowhere, like the whole trying to capture the alternative time machine. It's kind of like, well, why? And where did it come from? And what is it? And oh, they've just been shot. What? Okay, like that doesn't hold together that well. And there are decisions that are made very, very clearly to try and satisfy fans that don't come off. And probably the real sort of epitome of that is the casting of Michael Kilgarriff as the Cyber Controller. J&T clearly expects fans to go, oh my god, you went and got the guy from 1968 and you got him to play the same character again. That's so good of you. You really care. Your attention to detail, John, wonderful. Whereas instead they've gone...
Who's this fat bloke?
Yeah. If he wasn't Michael Kilgarriff, would you ever have cast him in this role? Yeah. And the answer is no.
But it makes you think, doesn't it? Because I just said a moment ago, isn't it great to be back on Telos, but they could have done it retro. So they have this attention to detail to get this specific actor to play this specific role, but they don't make the tombs look more retro and more like Tomb of the Cybermen. I find that just bizarre.
Yeah, it's interesting where the messages came through and where they didn't. And I think it's probably a reflection on where J&T had a more direct decision-making process. You know, he signed off casting, whereas perhaps he didn't have quite the same control over the designer. And if this was modern Doctor Who, particularly Russell T Davies era Doctor Who, where they'd have their famous tone meetings, that probably would have all been rounded out a bit more.
Agree.
But look, a imperfect, but I think mostly positive, fun adventure to start off with.
Are you going to score these out of 10 as we go along?
I hadn't been planning to, but I can.
Could you? Because I would give this a 6.5 out of 10.
I would go a 7.
Okay, fair.
It's there's room for improvement, but yeah, it's definitely well and truly above a pass.
Yeah, it is for me too.
Like if I'm calling 5 a pass, this is beyond that, well and truly.
Okay, 6.5 for me, 7 for you. Let's move on to Vengeance on Varos.
So a broader point that I wanted to use Vengeance on Varos to explore. One of the things that really comes through with Eric Saywood's work for the show is he's a very big believer in stories must happen in a world. You can't just arrive on, Planet X and have generic things happening without any sort of context, without any sort of zeitgeist. Mm-hmm. You actually have to create a world, and who is in charge of the world, and what's the feeling of this world? How does this world work? And you see this through his work very, very strongly in season 21. You know exactly how the sea base works, how it fits into the bigger world. You know how Frontios works. You know how that works, how it's controlled, how people interact with each other, their philosophies. Androzani, Major and Minor, same sort of thing. And you see that again, I think, in this season, particularly in Varos, where he said to Philip Martin, go and create a world and then put the story in it. That, I think, is a really good thing. I think it's one of the strengths of Eric Saywood's work. And where normally I would say Andrew Cartmel beats Eric Saywood on a lot of things, on this I think Eric Saywood is ahead of Andrew Cartmel, who's like, it's going to be in a space refrigeration shop. Why? Who cares? Just let's go with it.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking Cartmel for that. Like, that's a cool, fun way to do storytelling. Like, it's perfectly cool. But Eric Saywood does sit there and go, right, you have a planet. What's the history of this planet? Oh, it's a penal colony that's devolved. Okay. How is it governed? What's their, how's their economy work? How's their justice system work? And so when you've worked out all that and then put a story in, I think it's really effective. And I think that's why this really is a contender for the story of the season. And I've got to say, when I was a fan in the late 80s, early 90s, this is the one that was very much seen as, if there's a classic in season 22, it's Varos.
Yeah, agree. Although I've got to say, as a younger viewer, I was not entirely on board with that at the time. I kind of found this one a bit boring when I was younger, but as I got older, I thought, oh no, my God, what was I thinking? This is actually really, really good. There are bits in it that are a bit cheesy. There are bits in it that I would love to have seen done better, either, in terms of the acting or the direction. But the actual concept, oh my God, this is great.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I kind of really got it as a 6-year-old, and the subtleties and the complexities certainly passed me over, but I understood this idea of they get to vote, and if they vote no, he dies, and, they voted yes, so he gets to live a little, like I got all that, and I understood it. I didn't really get the whole, it was a send-up of video nasties and everything like that, but it was a good adventure, and I enjoyed the Greek chorus as well. So I have fond memories of this, and I've always had a fond... No, that's the wrong word. I've always had a strong regard for Vengeance on Varos.
Okay, well, that's good. For the majority of my life, I have enjoyed it. We're only talking about when I was quite young. By the time I was in my mid to late teens, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it now.
So coming back to it, Rob?
Look, I'm always a bit disappointed by studio-bound stories in the 80s. I always feel they feel a bit small and cheap, and then, that detracts from the story in some ways. But this one, coming back to it now, I like the concepts. I'll say again, I mentioned the acid bath earlier when I was talking about violence in Who. I don't mind that scene at all. I don't even see the Doctor as necessarily, killing those two guys. I think... fine. I think this is tough sci-fi. Again, it's gun sci-fi, and I'm okay with gun sci-fi. I know a lot of people who recoil from the thought of it. I don't have a problem with it.
I certainly understand what you're saying about it looking like it's been made in a small 80s studio, and there are very obvious moments where it's clear they've got 4 foot of corridor and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, but even in the McCoy era, say in the Happiness Patrol feels similar to this to me.
Absolutely. It's certainly not Robinson Crusoe on that.
No.
Again, I think the characters are all very well written. The security chief, Quillam, the governor, played by Martin Jarvis very well. I don't think all of them are as well acted as they could be, and in fact, I think the acting is a problem in this story. But we've got to mention as well, this story does give us probably the one iconic image or monster out of the Colin Baker era, and arguably out of most of J&T's time as producer in Sill.
Yeah, look, that's very fair. I mean, to skip ahead in this season, I think the design of the Borat is amazing. But in terms of what people remember, and it does help that he's brought back again in the next season as well, of course. But as a new original character who people remember, who comes back twice, hard to argue with that, Dave.
Yeah, and I did enjoy his performance again. And in fact, I think my enjoyment of Nabil Shaban's performance as Syl does improve as I get older, and I do appreciate some of the subtleties in it and some of the quibs and some of the asides. I think it's actually quite a deep performance. It's a shame about his black guards. We'll just sort of cringe and move on.
Well, in some ways, it's a shame that it was like, J&T will cast for diversity, and what do when they get this disabled chap in? They make him a monster. It's like, oh no, I'm not sure that was what you were meant to do.
Yeah, I'm kind of okay with that's the wrong word, because I don't want to sound like I'm saying that they should be playing a monster, but I think that it's a cool part and it's a leading part, and I don't have a problem. He's an actor. Actors play monsters sometimes. I'm pretty relaxed about that, really. First time though in this season where we can explore the criticism that the Doctor doesn't solve the plot, because what actually solves the plot is Syl gets an email from his boss saying pay any price, at which the governor's like, any price you say, huh? What about 17 units? Like, not 500 units. It's like, 17, I'm really going to push the boat out. Yeah, good on you. But the Doctor, like, other than reading out the email to Syl, the Doctor doesn't actually solve that problem, nor does he bring down a regime overnight. The regime is in place when the Doctor leaves.
Yeah, it is. It's very different in comparison to Doctor Who stories of the past, where he would absolutely have brought it down and, been shaking hands with, the people who are going to take over the planet at the end of the story and all that sort of stuff. So, but I mean, that's noteworthy, and maybe that's commendable in some ways.
It's something that if we were to be doing just this story, we could explore in a lot of depth. As a liberal, I do find myself concerned by the idea that the Doctor found a dysfunctional but democratic process of leadership and replaced it with a non-democratic, frankly, autocratic form of leadership. Now, we're not supposed to care because Martin Jarvis is meant to be a good guy. There's not a lot in the story that really supports him being a particularly good guy. He's just not as nasty as some others. And, I don't think the ending quite works if you want to really get analytical about it, but the adventure does.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess at the end, after the Doctor's gone, he does, issue that message that things are going to change. So maybe that's why he's a good guy, because he sort of did that in the end?
Yes, I will believe that when the Governor issues writs for genuine popular elections and representative democracy and all that sort of thing, and I'm not sure that that's what he's about to do.
Right, okay. So, Dave, before we move on to Mark of the Rani, what would you score Vengeance on Varos?
I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Oh, that's very high. I think I can only go as high as a 7.5.
Okay, still a step up, though.
Oh, yeah, it's a step up from Attack, and it's a reasonable score. I have no problems with the story. I think it's a pretty good one.
I do have problems with the next story.
Okay.
Which is, of course, Mark of the Rani.
Yes.
I think it's a mess. I think it's boring. And I think it's terribly acted by almost all of the cast. This, probably more than any other story, probably even more than the one that's coming next, epitomises that view of, we're giving you everything that you love. Why don't you enjoy this? We're giving you the Master back. We're giving you an historical. We've got this cool time lady with an extra TARDIS. And there's a dinosaur at the end. Why don't you love this? And some fans do love this, but I just go, yes, but why are you doing any of it? What's the reason for it? The Rani, okay, she kind of makes sense. Doesn't really end up where Pip and Jane Baker really intended her to, but she works, I guess. I think her performance here is a little bit arch, and it's fabulous, but it's a little bit like, ooh, okay. The Master is just totally redundant and is a bit of a thickie. Most of the supporting cast cannot act, or just are completely bemused about what the hell they're doing. Now, I don't know the actor's name, but the guy that would go on and be the father in the big Pride and Prejudice adaptation, who's the main character in this, he's just walking around the set going, I don't know what's going on, and I can't hide it.
Yeah, look, I know people who absolutely love this story, and visually, because they're out on location, as I've said on many episodes of this podcast, Dave, I love it when they're out on location. It just adds that little bit extra. But even that can't save this. It's just a whole bunch of ingredients thrown into a pot but not stirred up and not cooked, and then just tipped onto a plate. The ingredients are there. It just hasn't become anything,
That's a really good way of putting it, Rob. I really agree with that. To pull out, though, from what you said, a couple of the strengths, I agree the location work is pretty good. And when they're on location, the work between Colin and Kate and Anthony Ainley, I think actually does step up a notch. Their interactions kind of go down a level and therefore are of a better quality. There's a bit more subtlety and a bit more humour in the way they're interacting without it being, hey, here's a gag and here's a witty retort. It's natural wit. It's natural dialogue between them. So that helps as well. This is also, I would argue, Perry's best story. Not necessarily Nick LeBrun's best performance, but Perry's best story in that she actually gets a whole plotline to herself that hinges on her and her capability and her knowledge.
Yeah, the botanical knowledge. Yeah, absolutely. But that dress she wears, Dave. Can we talk about the dress? It's horrible.
It is. Look. I'm not somebody who particularly, as you know, notices or cares much about the costumes the companions wear, but I do notice this one because it is hideous, yes.
And I know you don't get into the fashion too much, Dave, so that's why I thought I'd throw it in.
Yeah, no. This is one even I just look at and I go, oh my God, what have they done?
Yeah.
Which, look, at least she's not dressed in a leotard and short shorts again, which is, famously a gay man's idea of what straight men find sexy.
Yes.
But, yeah, look, at least Perry in this is a lot more than a peril monkey. She does have that moment where the Rani tricks her and everything, and you go, well, okay. She stands up to the Master, though. She outwits him. Mm-hmm. She does push the trolley in the wrong direction, which is... that scene can go either way depending on my mood. There are moods where I sit there and go, oh, for God's sake, this is terrible. And there are other ones where he's going, no, Perry, the other way. And I'm just going, this is hilarious. I don't care. It really depends on the mood I'm in.
Agreed. I'm just looking at my notes for this story, Dave. I don't particularly like this one at all. I don't really have that much to say on it. It's disappointing, because it's got great location work, as we said. It's got George Stevenson in it. That's great. It's got this new Time Lord we've never met before. There is so much potential, and it just doesn't live up to it. It's so disappointing.
No, it is, however, and I'll be maybe making a note of this when we get to the end of our run, it is a story in the season that perhaps feels least like the rest of the season. There actually isn't any moment of fan-condemned violence in this that needs to be excused. There isn't quite the same level of Perry just being abused, whether it's physically or sexually or emotionally, in it. A lot of those themes and faults or strengths of other stories just aren't here. It is quite an odd little piece in this story, and I wonder if that's maybe why fans do have this one as their favourite, because it is very different from the rest.
Yeah, certainly for fans who aren't into the more gun stuff and the rest of the season. Yeah, that could actually be why they like this one, because there are many, many people I've heard and talked to who do like it. It's just not my cup of tea at all.
No, and look, that's why I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. If I'm saying 5's a pass mark, this is not way below that, but I have to say it is just below a pass.
I'm going to be a little kinder and give it a pass. I'll say 5.
So, Rob.
Yes.
We're giving you the Second Doctor and Jamie and Sontarans and location filming overseas. Why aren't you loving this? Actually, I'm kind of do love this one.
Do you really?
Love is probably too strong a word. I enjoy this one and I appreciate it for what it is. It is very easy to pick apart, but it has got the Second Doctor and Jamie. It's got that lovely black and white fade up to colour opening. It's got Jacqueline Pierce in it. Come on. Mm-hmm. It's got location filming. And okay, it's not the best location filming. In fact, of the 4 I think they did in the classic series, this is by far the weakest of them. I mean, this isn't City of Death. This isn't Amsterdam, which, look, for all the faults in Arc of Infinity, Amsterdam was well used. My God, it's certainly not Lanzarote, which was just fantastic.
Oh, yeah, that looks like a movie.
Yeah, but it is still overseas location filming. We're not filming in a quarry. We're not filming in the home shires of London or of the UK. It looks different, and that's a good thing. The characters, I think, are good. The actors, I think, are good. It doesn't hold quite as well together as it should. No. And maybe that's where I'll hand over to you, because you seem to be a little bit more down on this than I am.
Look, again, this one, I feel, and it's genuinely, to me, too long. I think it does go on for too long. But what I will say is I came to this was one of the ones, because I was watching this season piecemeal, I actually read the novel of this, I'm pretty sure, before I actually saw the episode.
The one Robert Holmes Target novel.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I think it was the 100th Doctor Who novel. Didn't it have that on the cover?
It did, yes, yeah.
That's the one. And so, like a lot of Target novels, I think I come to the story forgiving a lot of things because I read the Target novel and that told the story in a way that I could imagine in my head, and in my head it was quite a wonderful thing. But then you actually see it on the screen and it's like, oh no. I mean, even the fact they've got Patrick Troughton with grey hair, as a young fan, even as an old fan now, I think, why? When you brought him back in 5 Doctors, you let him have the black hair. Look, I know he's becoming an older man, but gosh, he just looks so unlike his Doctor was.
Now, I believe that was Troughton's insistence, though.
Is that right?
I think so. You're not dyeing my hair. I think so.
And look, maybe I can applaud that on some levels. He doesn't want to be vain. He wants to, sort of age a bit. But it just doesn't match what we know of where this Doctor is at.
Yeah, I hear you.
And why does Jamie have that ridiculous... What do they call that thing where it connects to the kilt and goes up over the shoulder? And like, he never wore that on TV, and you put him in this really hot environment wearing his warmest costume yet. I don't get that at all. I used to sit there as a younger fan thinking, this is all silly. His hair should be black. Jamie should be wearing just a T-shirt or a jumper or something, not this huge, heavy thing. Gosh. They're the things I picked up on, Dave.
Yeah, having said though, Rob, what's your overall view of this one? How does it make you feel?
I think it's missed opportunities because I don't mind Sontarans at all. And it's funny, Sontarans are like Cybermen to me, the more stories of theirs I watch, the less I like the stories, but I'm into the race. It's the same as Cybermen. The more Cybermen stories I watch, I just get disappointed, but I actually like Cybermen very much. Here, the Sontarans are on the downward slope. I think their first couple of outings with Tom Baker are very good. Their third outing with Tom Baker, I think they're going downhill. They're really going downhill here, and then by the time we get to the modern era and they're just children in suits, I'm just so disappointed with them. So, on one hand, it excites me that there are Sontarans running about, and I think Shockeye and Chesini are great, interesting characters as well, but there's just something about it that just doesn't come off for me, and it's disappointing. And I wanted to love this as a kid, and I did love the novel, but when I saw the story, I thought, no, it just doesn't work for me somehow. So
I mostly like the Sontarans in this. I do like the characters. I like the dialogue between them. I like the way they interact with the other characters. I love that shot where you first see them, where you see the ships in space, and before the computer announcement even says what they are. As a fan, if you've seen the Time Warrior or Sontaran Expedition, you go, I know what that is. They're Sontarans. Mm-hmm. And then the moment where you just get the 3-fingered hand with the wand that just comes up into frame to cover the Doctor.
Yeah.
I think that's all really well done. They are ridiculously too tall. It is incredibly clear that the masks have not been stapled to the necks of the costume, and you can actually see the edge of the mask a couple of times when Stike bends over, and you know, you can see down his neck. That's terribly done. But overall, I really quite like them, and I think Robert Holmes has given them a very similar sense of humour to what you do get from Lynx in The Time Warrior. I actually think it is a return to form in that sense. They just look wrong.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's the visuals that really takes me out of it, because when it comes to Sontaran stories, if you're drawing it as a graph, it just goes down, you know, from the Time Warrior onwards. And I wish it wasn't that way, because I do quite enjoy them as a race. I'm fascinated by them. I think they're really interesting.
Very.
I just can't get behind them in this.
Yeah, and look, that's fair enough. As I say, I enjoy the other characters. Shasini's really cool. I like Dastari and the way that he sort of, you know, he's allowed to reform as a character. But if I could pull on a bit of a thematic comment here, I said when we were talking about Attack, Rob, that I wanted to talk about the violence in a bit of a block, and I think here's the time to do it, because I've really been thinking about this as I've thought about this episode. As we go through, you're absolutely right in everything that you've said, and other fans have said before about Attack. Well, the Doctor does what he has to do to get out of the situation. The acid bath in Varos, the Doctor doesn't push them in, da-da-da-da. The violence in this one, yes, the Doctor's defending himself against Shockeye with only what he has. He's innovating the way the Doctor does, etc., etc., etc. Every one of the violent moments in this season, and there's others to come, I agree, are utterly excusable. However, if this was a police investigation, you would be saying that there is a pattern of behaviour whereby for every allegation, okay, you've got an alibi or an excuse or a justification for every one of them, but the fact that there is this pattern of excuses needed suggests to me that actually something is wrong, and I can't think of another season where we have to find these excuses again and again and again. And so I do think that actually, yes, individually, you can excuse every instance of violence in season 22. But the fact that we have to so frequently, I think actually is a problem.
Okay. I'm going to turn this towards the current series that we've just watched with Jodie Whittaker. And I don't want this to be a long conversation.
Yeah.
But in the Jodie Whittaker series, you know, we've not got a lot of violence. We've not got a lot of strong enemies. Not a lot of deaths in most of the stories. And we've looked at those and gone, well, God, that's boring. You know, is this entirely realistic? Shouldn't the Doctor have stronger, you know, adversaries? Isn't it more exciting when a Dalek appears and actually mows down tons of people, because that's what Daleks do? And I think, well, here we have the Doctor in a tough universe, having to deal with people who do want to kill him or, you know, do him harm for some reason. And I think, where's the balance? You know, if there were a few more stories in this season like Mark of the Rani, would that have balanced things out a bit? But when we've just looked at Mark of the Rani, we've said this is quite different to everything else, and we don't like it.
So let me say that the balance perhaps is that you can have the violence without the Doctor being continually the perpetrator. And if you look at the McCoy era, which is further into the 80s than this is, and let me say as an aside, I totally get this is a product of the 80s. Like, I get where this is coming from. It's not a complicated concept. Like, where did this violence come from? It came from the 80s. Everything else on television. But the McCoy era, which is further into that, gets away with it because it gives the violence to Ace. The Doctor doesn't blow up a Dalek with an anti-tank rocket. Ace does. Ace carries around Nitro 9. She's the one that's taking out Cybermen with gold coins. Okay, it's a bit silly, but you know, she's the one doing that. Whereas here, it's the Doctor that's taking life. It's the Doctor that's being violent, whilst the female companion is just being abused left, right, and centre. Once again, here she's just captured and, you know, almost chopped up by Shasini on many, many occasions. She's just here to be just treated badly. And I think that's the difference between the two eras.
Yeah, and is it because they're trying to do something different with the Doctor? You know, you think of Peter Davison being sweet, sweet feet, and all of this. Are they just trying to make him tougher by blowing away Cybermen in the first story, or wrestling with people and they fall into acid baths and things? They're just trying to make him more of a, not so much an action hero, but just a bit tougher somehow.
Absolutely. You can't have this pattern of behaviour that I'm claiming exists and not have it having been a very deliberate tonal decision by the production team. Now, there are people out there that might say, and I don't, I totally understand, that it is a perfectly good and welcome decision to make. I know fans that after watching the Davison era were like, yes, this is cool, more of this please. That's fine, it's a perfectly valid opinion to have. I'm just saying that it really does stand out in the history of Doctor Who, not just from what came before, but from what would come afterwards as well.
Yeah, I mean, roll back to the Tom Baker era. He's certainly not afraid to get into fights and wrestles with people or shoot guns either. But this seems to be taking that and amping it up a bit more than maybe is healthy.
Yes, it's being more direct about it, and it's being more frequent about it. And I agree, you can excuse every instance and justify and validate every instance in story terms and in tonal terms and everything. I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying you can't pretend, though, that there isn't a pattern that is far more frequent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look, the pattern is there. And when it comes to, and I guess we've just got to mention it briefly, at least the Doctor killing Shockeye with the cyanide. Shockeye has wounded him. Shockeye is chasing him. I remember when I was younger watching that, I felt quite scared by that scene. It was generally worrying. If someone chases you with a knife and they've already wounded you, that's kind of a scary thing. That's very visceral. That's not just being shot. That's a more personal sort of thing. Someone wanting to knife you.
Let me ask you, Rob, if Shockeye had got a lot more makeup on, green hair, or was a man in a rubber suit or something like that, would we blink twice at the Doctor killing him with cyanide? Or is it because he's basically a human with big warts?
Look, I think we would take it a bit better if he looked more alien, and that maybe says something about us.
Yeah, maybe, but certainly
us as people. I mean, not just you and me.
Yeah. No, I exactly. That's kind of the point I was getting towards. That if the Doctor gasses Sontarans or Silurians or Pteroleptals, well, of course he should, because they're the monsters. They're guys in rubber suits. A guy in just a rubber wart. Ooh, that's a little bit close to knuckle. He's basically a person. Now, he's clearly not. Like, Shockeye is clearly an alien in every way, shape and form. Culturally, physically, he's clearly not a human. But he looks like one, and that doesn't sit right with us, I think. That is a problem.
Yeah, agreed. Should we give this a score, Dave, before we move on?
Go ahead, Rob.
It's a tough one, but I'm going to come in at 6 out of 10.
I'm going to come in at 7, on par with Attack of the Cybermen.
Okay, very fair. Next up, Time Lash. And this is one that you got me to watch. I can't think of the exact episode. It's probably within the last dozen, maybe last half a dozen monthly episodes. You challenged me to watch Time Lash and see what I thought of it, because I hadn't seen it for a while. And I said at the time, I was actually surprised by it. I thought it was better than I remembered. Still not a great story, but I particularly liked the way it took a historical figure and brought him in. And, conceptually, I thought it was good. It's not up there with Vengeance on Varos by any means, but it doesn't quite deserve the kicking it gets from fans. That's my opening gambit on this one.
I'm glad you said that, Rob, because I'm of a very similar opinion. Now, I'll just say, right at the top of this discussion about Time Lash, Paul Darrow, love him. He is the man, and I will watch him do anything. And frankly, him just having a huge amount of fun at the expense of Colin Baker in this, I can watch that any day of the week. I'll just put that front and centre of the conversation. Beyond that,
yes,
I think this is a story really of two halves.
Yeah.
Part one, I actually think is pretty good. Its production values aren't great, although it's got some nice touches like the android and that sort of thing. And later when we see the Borat, his makeup. But this is another example of a world that kind of works. Like, we know how the power structure on this works. We know how oppressed they are. We know how the systems work. And, there are references to schools and hospitals. And there's actually a society out there beyond just the 3 rooms that we see, which is that Eric Saywood trademark that I spoke about. Mm-hmm. That's there. There are some good performances. There are some terrible ones. The Doctor sort of gets involved about halfway through, so this is another one where the Doctor is less involved, but I quite like part 1 of this story. I think it works. I think it's fun. Part 2, I agree, does fall down. There's some couple of really cool ideas. They do have fun with time. I think the best thing about this is the stuff they do with the time crystals and all the rest of that and everything. I think that's quite clever. The Borat is good, but the moment when the script said that they go inside the time lash to find all these crystals, someone should have just said, frankly, Eric Saywood should have said to the script editor, we can't afford that. Let's talk about what else we could do instead. That scene should not be in there. Perry being menaced, basically a convoluted plan that is meant to end in the forced rape and impregnation of Perry. I mean, that is the Borat's plan. The Borat's plan is to change her to something he finds attractive so he can rape her and get her pregnant. Like, that is the bad guy's plan. That is a problem. And that is a particular problem for this companion because it happens all the time. And then you get, all the stuff with the second ending where the second Borat comes out and just sort of gets talked off the edge of a cliff. You get all of that extra padding stuff, which, it's not a bad scene, but it stops the episode stone cold. Then the Doctor defeats the Bandrel's missile with a I'll explain later.
That was the big one for me. That's still the sticking point for me.
Yeah.
That is cheap. That is terrible.
Yeah, that is as cheap as the Bandrel prop.
Even cheaper, I think, Dave.
Yeah.
But something that's not cheap is the Borat. That makeup, I'm going to say, is easily the best. No, I think of the Destroyer as well. It's one of the top 2 makeup jobs, prosthetics of the 80s era of Doctor Who. I think it's extraordinary, and it's a shame it's wasted in this story.
Oh, it is so good. It is one of those memories that has sat with me since I first saw it as a 6-year-old. And in fact, I can remember when we got the Target novel as a family and the cover with the picture of the Borat and me spending time sitting there like really pulling apart the human face and the Moroc's face and just how the eyes are different levels and the nose starts at one level and merges down to another level and the mouth starts at one level and it merges and contorts into a Morak. Yeah, really, really cleverly done. Really, really good. There is some good stuff in here. There are some good performances in here. There's some fun performances in here. It ends up in a really bad place, though, and it's just a mess by the end of it. Yeah,
look, I think I've said all I want to say on this. Should we score?
Sure, I'm going to go for a 6. It is a pass. There's enough in this for me to call it a pass, but it is a notch or 2 or 3 below the other stories so far.
Okay, I'm sitting at 5.5.
Yeah, okay.
We haven't been too out of sync with each other on this.
No, that's interesting, isn't it?
No, it's good. Which brings
us to Revelation.
Yes, which I'm very excited to talk about because I'll just go out here and say it is my favourite story of the season.
Well, why don't you kick us off, Rob, with your reasons why?
Dave, this was another one. This was the second one this season when I saw it as a younger person that I didn't quite get what was going on. I found it very weird. I thought it was very unlike all the other Dalek stories I'd seen where Daleks just got around and shot everybody and, they were very simple, linear stories. I used to look at the character of the DJ and think, oh, this is just embarrassing. I was a Young Ones fan, so I knew who Alexei Sayle was, and I just felt, no, Alexei Sayle can't be in Doctor Who, and why is this so weird? I really didn't like this story as a younger person. But as I got older, I saw it as just so quirky and weird and different. And we talk about Mark of the Rani being different to the other stories this season. I think this story is different too. Sure, it's got the violence and such, but just the way it is written, I think is wonderful. And, people bag Eric Saywood, but you pull out Earthshock and you pull out this and you think, well, he can write quite well. And I know you particularly like The Visitation too. So it's it's interesting how much he gets bagged, even though he's written some good stuff for the show. Yeah, and this is I think his best story for the show. I don't think you'd agree with that, but I think it's his best.
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I'll say up front, I have a healthy and, over the years, growing respect for Revelation of the Daleks. I think it's a good piece of television. I personally don't enjoy it.
Okay.
So when I watch it at just that most gut, heart, level, am I enjoying this? The answer is generally no. Can I respect some of the performances? Absolutely. Can I respect the writing and what Saywood's writing? Very, very much so. And again, as a kid, went totally over my head. The older I get, this one, I totally, as you say, appreciate what he's doing. I appreciate the reference to Evelyn Waugh's work. I get all of that. Love it. But I'm not enjoying it. I like some of the set pieces. I've really learned to enjoy Alexi Sales, the DJ. Again, used to think it was really stupid, but now I'm like, this is actually really clever. And the way that he's playing it is actually really clever as well. And when you can make me feel for Alexi Sale being exterminated, job done. Well done. I give him points for that. I think Kara is a great character. Played really well. I love her offsider. What was his name?
Was it Vogel?
Vogel, yes. I love Vogel. I love the way they interact. I love the moment where he's exterminated, and before he collapses, he just has this one moment where he just turns to her and just wants to take in her presence, just for one more moment before he falls over and dies. I think there's stuff I like in here. I respect the direction. I respect the way that the production's been done, and J&T has clearly learned a long time coming lesson and not made the last story of the season the cheapie. He's made Time Lash the cheapie, so Revelation of the Daleks can be a big event thing, and that's a really good decision. Well done, J&T. Lots and lots I respect here.
I'll just jump in and say, what about Saywood's clearly doing the Holmesian double act with, Jobel and Tassenbeeker and Orsini and Bostock. He's got everyone paired off. I think it's just great.
No, you see, they just don't work for me. I get what he's doing. I get what he's doing with Jobel and Tassenbeeker, but in the end, they're just two unpleasant characters I don't much care about, and I'm kind of relieved when they both get killed. It's kind of like watching the recent remake of A Star Is Born. They're just such horrible people that when eventually bad things happen to them, I just think they deserve it. I don't care. So, and frankly, it's the same with Orsini and Bostock. I mean, they're not nice people. They're hired assassins. They're hired killers. Yeah, Orsini gets a couple of cool lines, and William Gaughan plays it really well, and he's a good get for the series. But do I care about them? No. Do I like them? Definitely not. And am I enjoying watching them go and be nasty to each other and other people? Not really.
Wow, that is interesting. Do you find there are many Doctor Who stories like that or is this a rare one where you can see what they're doing and you respect so much about it, like you've just been saying, and you like this and you like that, but you actually don't like watching it? Are there many stories like that for you, or does this stand out?
This really stands out in that respect. It really, really does.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, just because the way you described that then, I didn't think I'd heard you describe a Doctor Who like that before. No,
it really, this stands in a very strange part of E-Space for me. Like, this just, it doesn't even fit into my Doctor Who universe. It's like knocking on the outside saying, can I come in? And going, no, you're weird, go away. Huge respect for it. As I say, there's a lot I get, totally get. I'm just, at a deep level, I'm not enjoying watching it.
Okay. Well, before we score it, I just want to say I love the Imperial Dalek colour scheme as well, which was introduced here. I just think it's gorgeous.
Yeah, look, that is really good. The location filming is also really good. Can we have a quick conversation, though, and this is probably the last of the thematic conversations that I had down to have, which is, I've spoken a bit about other stories where the Doctor doesn't do a lot to solve the plot. In this one, he literally does nothing. The Doctor doesn't even arrive at Tranquil Repose until early in the second half of the story. He's still in the gardens by the end of part one. Of a two-parter. And what is it that resolves the situation at Tranquil Repose? It's Tarkus and Lilt get on the Skype and, go get the Black Daleks to come and take away Davros. Like, that's what resolves the problem. It's Orsini that blows up Davros's base and helps to take out Davros, and it's the Black Daleks that come and remove Davros and take everything away. If the Doctor hadn't turned up in this story. The only thing that would probably be different is the DJ probably wouldn't have been killed.
I look, I know you're right on this. It's funny though, isn't it? And do we think this is because Eric Saywood just isn't enjoying writing for Colin, or he's just got his own story in mind and he just doesn't care that he's writing the Doctor out of it, essentially?
I certainly don't think that it's him deliberately sitting down, going, I'm going to write a story without Colin, stuff him. I just think that he gets into this story and he's enjoying writing his characters so much that he's like, okay, I should probably get to the Doctor now. The Doctor and Perry walk through the wood some more. Right, back to my characters. The Doctor and Perry go over the wall. Right, back to my character. Like, I just think he's enjoying the other stuff so much. He doesn't bother with the Doctor.
I think you're right.
And that is a fault of the season. I mean, the show is called Doctor Who. And you can absolutely have stories where the Doctor is tangential to the plot and that's a point. Or, you know, as in the modern series, missing for an episode and let the companions have it. And in fact, as we said, one of the reasons why Mark of the Rani does work is the Doctor actually is removed from some of it, and Perry does step up and take control of that story, and that is the strongest part of Mark of the Rani in my view. And if there'd been more for Perry to do, that would have been good. But we're removing the Doctor and removing Perry, and it's hard. How does Colin really make his mark in his opening season if at the end of the day the Doctor doesn't solve the problem?
Yeah, very fair point.
It's a point we raised about Jodie Whittaker a couple of times.
Yeah, exactly right. If you had to score it though, Dave, I'm fascinated to know what you'll give it.
I'm going to give it a 4. Actually, no, I'm going to give it a 4.99.
Oh, that's harsh.
Which is simply to say, I respect the work that it's done, but if I'm judging, as I say, if I'm calling 5 my pass mark, I cannot get it over that line, call it a pass, because I don't enjoy it. So I'll give it all the respect right up to the pass. I'll give it a 4.99, but it just doesn't work for me, sorry. But what are you going to give it, given it's your favourite?
8 out of 10 for me, just pipping Vengeance on Varos to be best of the season.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. This is the one where we diverge. Everything else was very close.
Yeah, and I'm not shocked by that as well. And it's been really interesting to hear your views on this and where we do diverge, because we agree on a lot.
Yeah.
We just don't agree on the sum of the parts.
No. But I think you are looking forward to the hardback of this coming out, aren't you?
I am. I'm really interested to see what Eric Saywood does with this. And I think as a novel, it's going to be a really cool book.
I'm wondering if he'll expand it in some way. Will he give the Doctor more to do? Who knows?
Yeah, I'm really genuinely interested to find out. I really am.
Because he's had decades of feedback now on it, or will he just be stubborn and just do a very linear, straight down the line, this is what happened on TV?
Given his previous work in books like Slipback and The Twin Dilemma, I don't think that'll be his instinct. I think he'll really go into strange and interesting places with both his books.
Oh, that excites me. That really excites me.
So, Rob, what have you learned from this dive into season 22?
This is the first time I've looked at it as a whole and watched many stories from it in the same week for a long, long time. And do you know, I think it's better than I have previously regarded it. At the same time, though, I see the faults and I see why the show was cancelled and then it was eventually just rested for 18 months. But I think they didn't learn any lessons there because they didn't actually change anything when it came back. So that was a huge missed opportunity. I actually think it was right to rest the show at the end of this. They had gone down some rabbit holes and hadn't quite got it right. It was time to step back, have a rest, but then come back with something different. Get Colin in a new outfit, get a new script editor, try something different. And I think Colin could have really, had a great second season and then a wonderful third season. He might have left then, he might have continued on. Who knows what could have been if they had actually shaken things up. So although I like this better than I remember, and although I think there are some great stories in it, I think it was right to be rested. I just don't think they learned their lesson and rested it correctly.
What fascinated me going through this is wondering why it is that season 12 works so well and is so well regarded, rightfully well regarded, and this isn't, because it's doing the same tricks.
Yes. It is?
It's the same selection of monsters. It's almost exactly the same selection of monsters. Dalek, Centauran, Cybermen, just add the Master. It's giving you Patrick Troughton back. It's giving you good location filming. It's doing a lot of things kind of that we expect the first season of a new Doctor to do. And as I say, it just feels as though it's a trick that's been used once too many times. And, you know, it's like that comedian who has a routine and they keep doing it for 3, 4, 5 years and everybody loves it. And at some point people go, look, it's good, but I've seen it before. And I just think this one doesn't quite work. And it doesn't quite work, I think, because of a bit of the tone that goes over the top. It doesn't quite work because Nicola is just not working, or sorry, her character is not well treated. And Nicola is a very good actress, but she's not such a good actress that she can overcome the sheer dirt that is being fed up to Perry in this season. Yeah.
And look, throw on top of that Colin Baker in that outfit with his big personality. It's maddening because I do see how it can work and I do see moments I really like. But
do you know,
it's just, I can't take my eyes off him when he's in that coat. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
Do you know, not once during my rewatch did I notice the coat or care.
Is that right?
I just don't care. As I've said before, I get more annoyed about how bland Davison's costume is than how big Colin's costume is.
What about his persona, though? How it's really big. He should be on a stage, you know, not a little television set.
There are moments when it works really, really well, and it's really funny, or it's really encouraging, or it's really interesting, and there are moments where it's cringeworthingly bad. I think that we see far, far less of that cringeworthy stuff in Trial of a Time Lord, and I think had he had a third season, he would have absolutely smashed it. Absolutely smashed it. In the way that Davo absolutely smashed it in his third series. Not that Davo was bad in the first or the second, but I think most fans agree Davo really nails it in his third season, and it's just going. Even Tom Baker, who's classic Tom from season 12, by the time you get to season 14, he is at another level as well.
Yeah.
Pertwee is at another level by his third season as well. Like, Doctors do improve over time.
Capaldi's third season, I'd wager, was his best.
Yeah, Capaldi's, absolutely. Doctors do improve over time. There is a clear trajectory of improvement in Colin's performance as he does try things and learn from what works and what doesn't work. It gets better, and that's all I can say. The problem is that when you're being loud, your mistakes do stand out.
Exactly. Very much so.
But I was pleasantly surprised by this season. You know, I found a lot to respect in Revelation. I enjoyed Attack more than I thought I was going to. I enjoyed the Two Doctors more than I thought I was going to. Mark the Rani went further down in my opinion. Varos, I did see some of the faults that maybe maybe time had erased or time had diminished. But there is a lot to like in this season. There's also a lot that doesn't work, and I think that's the one-line summary.
All right. Did it deserve to be axed at the end of the season?
Yes, I think it did, because it is looking like it's out of ideas, and it's just doing Doctor Who for the sake of doing Doctor Who. And even the change to the 45-minute format, which we haven't touched upon, partly because I think it went out here in 25-minute parts, that really isn't made use of very well, really, until Revelation. And it's certainly with Attack of the Cybermen, you can clearly see that it's a 4-part story. Like, you could absolutely nail the moment that episode 1 was meant to end with a big reveal of the Cyber Leader. And yes. Then, like the tone and the tempo of that story is a 4-parter that just happens to be a 2-parter. And it takes them a full season to get used to that. And just as they're getting used to that, they go back to 25 minutes.
It's a very odd era for Doctor Who, that's for sure.
So, look, maybe I'll rephrase. Would I axe Doctor Who now with the intention of, really being axed? Okay, no. Do I think that it utterly deserved a, right, before we sign off and give you another series, go away, stop what you're doing, think about what you're doing, think about why you're doing it, and what you want to do with your next season, and then we'll give you another go. As you said earlier, though, that didn't happen, but that's a story for another day.
It certainly is. That was a lot of fun, Dave. I really enjoyed talking about season 22.
I did as well. I'm really pleased the listeners nominated that. I'll be honest, this would not have been close to my top 5 list if we'd been working it out between us. And so having that outside influence from the listeners throwing this at us, really good surprise. And yeah, really pleased we did it. I would not have done this had we not been suggested to us.
Yeah, I think I would have ended up somewhere in the Pertwee era, probably.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Anyway, before we wrap up, we have letters, listener emails, and these have actually been edited for time reasons. I've kept in all the central themes that people want to talk about, but gosh, people, you send us some long emails at times, and just for the sake of brevity, I've edited these down. Dave, shall we tic-tac back and forth on these?
Absolutely. Do you want to get us started, Rob?
I will. Steve Panozzo. Hello, Steve. Good mate on Facebook for me. One of Australia's leading cartoonists. Hey, Rob. What a cracking instalment of the Doctor Who show. Thanks for all the effort you two clearly go to in producing the podcast. For my money, please keep to the middle ground. There is clearly a lunatic fringe out there mouthing off on a continual basis about what they perceive Doctor Who should be, as there is seemingly with most science fiction properties, without much reference to logic or reality. For the next podcast, I'd like to see Season 11. See, Steve thought of Season 11 here as being worthy of reappraisal for a number of reasons. It was the first time I had ever watched Doctor Who in 1976. I was in my 12th year and in Year 6 at school. My friend at school, Andrew McCann, was a big fan, and he told me about it. The first episode introduced me to John Pertwee's dashing and heroic Doctor, the ever-so-hot Sarah Jane Smith, and the most amazing monster Lynx the Sontaran. I was hooked. There is so much in Pertwee's final series as the Doctor that meets the eye that I believe it's due for an appraisal.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. We'll definitely try to keep doing what we do.
Yeah, Pertwee's final season would have been good to do too.
I think that is on our shortlist for sometime in the future, yes. We have an email from Ben PM. From Sunny WA, he signs off.
Yes.
G'day, Rob and Dave. My suggestion for your next podcast is to delve into Season 22.
There we go. Hey!
I hope you enjoyed it, Ben. I recently rewatched it. While I understand the show was in turmoil around this era with BBC management not being supportive, I'm surprised at how hated it is amongst some fans. The fans I know, anyway. Colin Baker's performance is a big departure from the previous 5 Doctors, but I really liked it and feel that his run was cut undeservedly short. On another note, the Terrance Dicks episode was excellent. The importance of his role in Doctor Who could not be overstated. Cheers, Ben PM from sunny Western Australia. Look, I hope you enjoyed our chat about Season 22, and we'll see whether you agreed with our thoughts on Colin Baker's performance.
Yeah, drop us a line. William McCann III has written to us again, Dave. He says, hello again. I very much enjoyed all the information you shared about Terrance Dicks in your last episode. I've always admired his contribution to the Whoniverse, so much so that at the conclusion of a US convention I attended in 2016, when asked for the names of Doctor Who personalities I'd like to meet at a future con, Terrance was first on my list, followed by Philip Hinchcliffe and William Russell.
That's a really cool list, I just want to interrupt and say. That's a really cool list.
Yeah, and I would say William Russell's just been over at Galley 1.
Has he really?
Yeah, I saw a picture of him, and who was he sitting next to? He was sitting next to Carol Ann Ford. Yeah, the two of them on a couch. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Anyway, William goes on. Season 16, that would be my deep dive series selection in response to your request made of listeners at the conclusion of the last episode. Bit of an odd choice, I'll admit, given that Sarah Jane Smith is my favourite companion, and that the Sixth Doctor is my Doctor, and with all the whining and fandom against series arcs, but somehow the key to time exists outside normal rules. Well, William, the fact we did a Sixth Doctor season tonight, you might enjoy that anyway. Each episode in Key to Time is able to stand on its own, featuring well-rounded supporting casts with memorable performances turned in by many, along with Tom Baker in full stride as the Doctor. These are but a few reasons why the Key to Time is among my favourites. Happy travels from William.
Look, that's definitely one I would love to do. The problem, and I'll just let you know a secret here, William, is it would be what I would call a gushing episode, which is just me going, episode story number 1, that was great. Story number 2, that was great too. Story number 3, that was even better. Like, I don't know, that's always the most interesting form of discussion, but I would love to chat about the Key to Time one day.
Yes, and I'd be here saying, yes, and this one has Mary Tam in it. Mary Tam's in this next one too. Oh, Mary Tam's in this next one. Oh, Mary Tam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, an email from Martin Gardner. Hello, hope you're all well. Not too bad, although the voice is a little strained, I must admit. You may have noticed. In terms of a season to look at in depth, why don't you just look at season 19, seeing as you're currently working your way through the Blu-ray anyway? Is Time Flight really as bad as all that? Is there actually a plot in Earthshock? Is Kinder a multi-layered philosophical masterpiece, or is it as flimsy as a giant pantomime snake? Cheers, and have a nice day. Another good suggestion there, Martin. I'm sure we'll get to it sometime.
I would love to do a Davo series, I've got to say, but yeah, it was just pipped this time by a Collins series.
Yeah. So look, that's just a summary of some of the suggestions we had. Lots of seasons people are interested in us having deep dives into. I enjoy having these conversations, so I'm sure there'll be a couple more across 2019.
Oh yeah, and as I said at the start, we got a bunch of tweets on this as well. I'm sure sometime co-host Mike Solko is disappointed we didn't do season 24, for example.
Yeah, there'll be lots of them, but hopefully you enjoyed season 22. Now, we need to mention, for those who haven't noticed, between this and our last monthly episode, we did do a special Alternate Galaxies chat about Press Gang.
Yes, well, I didn't, I've got to say, Dave.
No, that's right. You weren't there, were you, Rob?
I love Press Gang, and I was interested in doing it, but I just wasn't there on the day of recording. So I'm not on that episode, but a lot of fantastic people are. Yes,
we had friends from Flight Through Entirety and New to Who join us for that conversation, or join me for that conversation, I guess. So if you're interested in Press Gang, and we just go through and chat about a representative episode from each season, check out our discussion.
Yeah, I particularly like the way you would talk about the way Moffat was writing those stories and how he was still pulling the same tricks in Doctor Who. And, just bringing it back to Doctor Who. So even if maybe you haven't seen Press Gang, but you want to hear about a TV show that Moffat wrote that does sort of use some of the same tricks as Doctor Who, do give it a listen. Yeah, absolutely. Press Gang was the first thing that Moffat wrote for television, and we very much look at the show through the prism of, can you see proto-Moffat developing as this goes on, and you absolutely can. Absolutely. What are we going to do next month, Rob? Next month, Dave, I've had a very strange thought, and I think you're going to go with it, but let me just throw it out here for all the listeners to hear. I want to do sophomore stories. Basically, I want to look at the second story of each Doctor's career, Doctors 1 through to 13. I want to look at story number 2. Not their first, not their last, not their best, not their worst, but simply story number 2. When you suggested this to me, Rob, my first thought was, yeah, okay, why not? But then as I thought more about it, I thought, yeah, this is the story that isn't the big whiz-bang introduction. This is where you get to see them being the Doctor and doing doctoring and having an adventure for the first time, and how that's tackled differently, I think is actually going to be quite interesting, and I'm looking forward to it, and there's a real mix of stories in that list. Yeah, it's a mix of stories that when you think about it, you have probably never heard spoken about in one podcast before. No. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, me too. All right. Until then, though, I've been Rob. And I've been Dave. We'll see you next month. Bye. Bye. You've been listening to The Doctor Who Show, the podcast where too much Doctor Who is barely enough. Subscribe to us on iTunes or listen through the website at www.thedwshow.net. Write to us at hello@thedwshow.net or send us a quickie on Twitter @thedwshow. Facebook.com/The DW Show is also a good place to find us if you're so inclined. Our version of the Doctor Who theme arranged by George Locke. Look him up on YouTube, folks. This podcast is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. Doctor Who, all names and sounds, and any other related items are trademarks and or copyrights of the BBC. All other trademarks and trade names are properties of their respective owners. The official Doctor Who website can be found at www.bbc.co.uk/Doctor Who.
Paul Darrow, love him. He is the man.